So with that, our guest speaker this morning is obviously my wife. So Natalie's got some really good stuff to share, and I know that as she's been going through it, God has been throwing more and more and more at her. So there's a very good possibility that after today, you may hear from her again in the near future, my darling.
So I am not a pastor. I'm not a pastor. Nope, no thank you. Don't want that position. Don't want that role. He's more than willing to have it. But I've been a Sunday school teacher. I've been a regular teacher for many, many, many years. I've taught kids from birth to college and beyond. So I kind of tie everything in between. But one of my favorite things to teach is the Bible. I love teaching Bible. And it's kind of funny because the story I chose to teach about, I lived in Russia for 7 years. I taught there at an international school. So I had missionary kids and diplomat kids and nationals and just everybody, really. At one point, I was the only American in my class. So it was kind of fun. And so one of the stories, I was thinking about this earlier, is one of the stories that I'm telling about. I always tell the Bible story in my own words. I read the scriptures, obviously, but then I also kind of just tell it in my own words, kind of make it a little more personal, add a little more oomph to it, make it a little more interesting for the kids, because, they don't know what an ephod is.
Is that what you were doing, teaching the Bible?
Yeah. So one time I let the kids tell this particular story in their own words. And when I left Russia, one of those kids came up to me and she's like, you know what? The one thing I remember about your class is the day you let us tell the Bible story in our own words. And so, okay. So, that makes me feel a little better. Okay, a little more confident. So the story I chose for today is Joseph. Now, there's a lot to unpack with Joseph. He covers 10 chapters in the Bible, so it's a lot going on. And you kind of start when he's a young man, and he's, his teenagers, and it ends when he's probably in his 50s. So there's a long time span there. So we're going to try and get through most of Joseph. We'll see what happens. Like you said, there's just a lot to unpack, because the more I was thinking about it, the more truths and the more like, oh my gosh, this is relevant to this. Oh, this is relevant to this. Oh. So try to narrow it down a little bit to the original today. But Joseph was about 17 when this story starts. His story starts in Genesis 37, and it goes all the way to Genesis 47. So it's a long chunk of scripture. And he starts when he's 17. He is number 12 out of 13 kids.
Good Lord.
Tired mama.
He has 12 brothers and one sister, but most people don't talk about the sister. She had a rough story. But he was number 12 out of 13 kids. He's number 11 out of 12 brothers. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have 2 older brothers and an older sister, and that was enough for me. I can't imagine having 10 older brothers. My brothers tortured me. So not only does he have all these older brothers, he was kind of Dad's favorite kid. So he was kind of the spoiled one out of all these brothers. So, that doesn't exactly go well for your siblings when you know that you're spoiled. And it's different when you know you're spoiled, but, it is what it is. But when Dad goes out of his way to show favoritism to you, it did not go well for the older brother. So, no. Dad gave him this beautiful, bright coat. Dad gave Joseph this beautiful coat one day, and didn't give his brothers anything, just gave Joseph this coat. And his brothers were not happy. His brothers were just very jealous. You can't really blame them. And then Dad sends him off to go find out where his brothers are, and they weren't where they're supposed to. And instead of just kind of covering for his brothers, he comes home and tattles. Hey, Dad, guess what? They're not where they're supposed to. So all of his brothers got in trouble for not being where they were supposed to be. So Joseph wasn't really liked by his 10 brothers. at all. So then, knowing this, he's not really well liked by his brothers. He's spoiled by his dad. He's the favorite of them all. He's favored by his parents. And then, one night, Joseph goes to sleep and has a dream. And in this dream, he's in this wheat field and everybody's gathering these sheaves of wheat and they're putting them in bundles. And then all of a sudden, his brother's bundles start bowing down to his bundle. He's like, so the next day he wakes up, like any good kid, and goes, hey guys, guess what? I just had the coolest dream. And he goes and tells his brothers exactly what I just told you. I had these bundles and you guys were there and your bundle started bowing down to mine. Isn't that awesome? And his brother's like, no, it's not. You mean we're going to bow down to you? Are you crazy? You're a younger brother. We're not going to bow down to you. Are you nuts? So, didn't exactly, make him popular with his brothers. Goes to sleep another night, has another dream. This time, in the dream, there's these 11 stars, and the sun and the moon. And they start bowing down to him. Joseph apparently did not learn his lesson from the first time he shared his dreams with his family. Decided to do it again at dinner. My interpretation, not theirs. He shared his dream again with his family. And his dad is like, really? You think me and your mom are going to bow down to you? Are you crazy? No. So all of this has taken place. He's not well liked by his brothers. Mom and dad are kind of mad at him because, he's telling them they're going to bow down to him one day. And they're like, yeah, I don't think so. And so once again, his brothers were off with the sheep because that's what they were. They were shepherds. And they were off with the sheep and off with doing their thing. And Dad wanted to make sure, wanted to check up on them, see where they were. So he sends Joseph off to check up on him. And he's wearing his bright new coat, because it's cold outside. And he goes off just to go check on his brothers. And his brothers can see him from far away because it's his bright coat. And they go, he thinks he's so smart. He thinks we're going to bow down to him one day. Yeah, right. I know. Let's kill him. I'll put an end to this dream. Just kill him. And they do. They plot to kill their brother. I have never made my family that mad where they want to kill me. And I hope I never do. But I can see where they were coming from. Joseph was kind of an arrogant little kid. And so they took him and they kind of kidnapped him, threw him in a pit, took his coat off, dipped it in blood to make it look like
She got it.
to make it look like he had died. And then one of his brothers kind of talked some sense into the other ones, and he's like, let's not kill him. That might make God mad. Let's not kill him. But, it's kind of fun of an alternative here. So they did. They sold him. Much better. Yeah, let's not kill him. We'll just sell him. So they sold their brother. Sweet brothers. So now Joseph went from being the apple of Daddy's eye, the spoiled kid, the one with these big dreams and aspirations that God gave him, to a slave. I don't think that was on his plans. And then he went, not only was he a slave, he's being a slave in a totally different country. So he went from Canaan, and they walked him all the way back to Egypt. And so now he's in a culture he doesn't know. He's in a land he doesn't understand. And he's hearing people talk to him in a language he has no clue how to speak. And I've been there. When I moved to Russia, I did not know Russian. And they think when you don't understand them, it's because you can't hear them. So instead of talking to you and you're just like, yeah, I don't understand, they go, oh, okay, so let me talk to you louder. Like yelling at you is going to help you understand. It's like, you get really good at the pantomime. I don't know. And so that was kind of Joseph. Joseph is stuck in this land where he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know the culture. He doesn't know the language. He's kind of just figuring it out as he goes along. And I have to wonder when he's sitting there waiting to be sold as a slave, going, God, what's going on? You gave me these dreams but my brothers are going to bow down to me, that I'm going to be in this high position of some sort. And I'm about ready to be sold off to whoever has the most money. Are you in this? Did you forget about me? Did I misread the dream? What's going on? And then he gets sold. And he gets sold to Potiphar. Now, Potiphar was kind of like the vice president-ish of Egypt. Ish. High on the ish. He had a lot of power in Egypt. And so Potiphar has this high mucky muck up in the government of Egypt. And Joseph got to be in his house. Now, I don't think Joseph automatically earned the right to be one of Potiphar's top servants. I think he had to work his way up to it. So I'm assuming it's going to take a couple of years. You know, you got to learn the language, you learn the way of the house. But Joseph was obedient. He was obedient to God. He did his best in a situation that, quite frankly, sucked. Excuse the word, but it did. He was in a situation that he had no control over. He was put there by people that he trusted. And he had no control over the situation, but he had control over how he reacted to it. And so he chose to trust God, and he chose to do his best, even though he's a servant, even though he's a slave. He chose to do the best he could in that situation. And God honored that. And Potiphar saw that and continued to give him more and more responsibilities until he was in charge of everything in that house except for Potiphar and his wife. He was in charge of their finances. He was in charge of how the house was run. He was in charge of the land. He was in charge of all of it. And so he's like, all right, things are going good. Life is great. And then it wasn't. I don't know about you. How are you like, oh, great, this is good. 2025, we're going to start it off right. And then something happens and crashes right back down. I've had that happen a few times. And that's kind of what happened with Joseph. Everything is going good. He's in his mid-20s. He's like riding life. He's like the head of this house. Things are going great. Yeah, he's still a slave, but you know, life is good. You know, God's honored him. God's prospered him. Okay, he's seeing how this works. And then Potiphar's wife starts noticing him. You know, handsome young man. She's like, you're kind of nice and good looking. All right. You know, hey, come here. And he's like, no. She's like, what he doesn't know won't hurt him. And he's like, oh, yes, it will. Go away. And he kind of ran from her as much as he could. But one day she cornered him because he's in the house and tried to get him to do something that he shouldn't. And he honored God and he ran away. But because this lady was not used to being rebuffed at all, she lied and said that he had done something he shouldn't have. And Potiphar believed his wife. And so then Joseph went from being the head of the household to prison. He's like, once again, he had something happen to him that he had no control over. It wasn't even his fault that he ended up in prison because he didn't even do what he was accused of. And yet, once again, the rug was pulled out from under him, and now he's in prison. He was worse off than he was before as a slave. And he's going, I can't help but think, God, really? I thought we were doing well here. What happened? Did I misread the signs? Did I misread you? Did I forget something? Did I not see something? Did I make a mistake? Did I miss this? But he still chose to be obedient to God. and he still chose to react to the situation in a way that pleased God. Because once again, he's in a place where he didn't even put himself there. Someone else's choices, someone else's decisions landed him in that position. And yet he still chose to honor God there in prison. And because of it, he became one of the prisoners that had the most freedom. He actually was able to help the jailer. He was out passing drinks, passing out books, if you want to think of it that way. I don't know. But he was sweeping the floors. I'm not sure what he did. The Bible doesn't really go into a whole lot of detail. But he had a lot of freedom within that prison. And then one day, 2 special prisoners show up. The baker from the king, who served Pharaoh, and the wine tester. And they both had dreams. And because of the dreams he had had earlier, he was able to interpret those. So he's like, oh, yeah. And they're like, oh. And they both woke up like, oh, we have these dreams. We don't know what they mean. What's going on? So Joseph's like, hey, let me know what your dream is. I'll talk to God, see what he tells me. I'm like, okay. So they did. They told him the dreams. Both of them were very, very similar. The wine taster had a dream that they had 3 branches of wine show up. He squeezed them off, took them in a cup, took it to Pharaoh. Simple dream. Okay, well that means that, the 3 branches of grapes mean in 3 days you're going to go and take wine back to Pharaoh and you're going to be released in 3 days. The baker's like, cool. His dream was good. Let's see if mine's going to be really good too. And he's like, see, I had a similar dream. I had 3 baskets of bread on my head, and then all of a sudden these birds came down and ate my bread. And Joseph's like, yeah, you're going to have the best outcome. See, in 3 days, you're going to die. Pharaoh's just going to have you killed. The baker's like, gee, thanks. Okay. And that's exactly what happened. 3 days later, the baker was taken out. He was killed. The wine tester was taken out. He was released. Before he was released, Joseph said, hey, when you get out, tell the Pharaoh my story. Tell him I'm here because I accused of doing something I didn't do. Let him know my story. And the wine tester's like, yeah, you got it, no problems. And like most of us, he had the best of intentions, but they forget, out of sight, out of mind. It happens. And that's kind of what happened with this wine taster. He left, and Joseph's still there for a good 2 or 3 more years. He's still in prison. So Joseph's probably in his 30s by this point, my guesstimate. And he's still there. And then one day, Pharaoh has a dream. And he can't, it's so horrible that he really doesn't even remember it. I don't know about you, but I've had those dreams where you dream it, and it's so vivid, and it freaked you out, but you can't always recall all the details of it. And that's kind of the dream that Pharaoh had. He had this dream that really freaked him out, but he couldn't really recall all the details. So he's bringing in all the people in his kingdom. Hey, can you tell me this guy, the magicians, and all those people. And they're like, well, yeah, tell us, and we'll tell you what it means. He's like, I can't remember all the details. Can you guys kind of fill in the blanks for me? And they're like, no. But the wine taster remembered this. He remembered his dream. He remembered that Joseph was able to help him with his dream. And he's like, you know what, Pharaoh, there's this guy in prison. He knows dreams. He knew my dream. He knew the baker's dream, and it happened exactly the way he said. Try him. You've tried everybody else. Try him. So he did. So he brought Joseph up out of prison. Guy's been in there for quite a while now. And Joseph's like, you know what? I can't do this, but God can. God can interpret this dream. So let me pray. And then so he did. And then he was able to tell Pharaoh what those dreams were. Now, Pharaoh had 2 dreams, just like had 2 different dreams, but they both meant the same exact thing. And one of them was that he was sleeping, and all of a sudden there's this river, and these cows come out of the river, these nice, big, fat, huge cows. And then, big burly cows. And then all of a sudden these little skinny cows came out. They're like, you can see the bones coming out. You can see their skeleton on the backside. They haven't eaten in years. And they ate the fat cows. Kind of a creepy dream. I can see why Pharaoh kind of got creeped out by this. And another dream was that he had these stalks of grain, and there were 7 stalks of grain. Same with 7 cows. Sorry, I forgot that part. And these 7 stalks of grain grew, and there were these huge, big, fat, plump stalks of grain. And these other 7 stalks of grain came up and just swallowed the big stalks of grain. And so he's like, what's going on here? And Joseph's like, look, this is what's going to happen. For 7 years, you're going to have plenty. You're going to have the best harvests you've ever had. Your cows are going to have a whole bunch of calves. You're going to have the best years this country has ever seen. But then after that, you're going to have 7 years of famine. And the famine's going to be so bad that no one's even going to remember the first 7 years, the 7 years when everything was going so well. It's going to be so bad that nobody's going to remember this. And he's like, okay, so what should I do about this? And Joseph's like, hey, I'm not in charge, but if it was me, I would put someone in charge to make sure that you collect the extras from the people, put it away for a rainy day, because you're going to need this. And it's not just going to be here, it's going to be everywhere, so other people are going to be coming to you looking for food. So if you've got food stored up, you can make money off of this. Like any person in charge of government, they like making money. He's like, that sounds like a great idea. And so he did. He put Joseph in charge and did exactly what Joseph suggested. And that's where the story kind of takes an interesting turn. Because it happened exactly like God said. They had 7 years of plenty. Joseph put stuff aside for a rainy day. And then the 7 years of famine started. And it hit not just Egypt, but everywhere. And what's kind of interesting to me in Scripture, especially in Genesis, every time there was a famine, everybody went to Egypt. I don't know why, but they did. And so Joseph's family went to Egypt. They were hit by this famine as well. And Jacob, Joseph's dad, goes, hey, we're running out of food. There's a lot of us. So, boys, I need you all to get on your donkeys and take some bags and go to Egypt and buy us some food, because we're running low and we're going to starve if you guys don't do this. And so we did. So all 10 brothers got together. The 11th brother stayed home, the youngest. And all the brothers went out there and they went to Egypt. And who do they get to go before? Joseph. Now, by this point, Joseph went from a 17-year-old kid, was the last time they've seen him. He's now probably in his 40s at this point, maybe 50s, give or take. So he's changed. So they don't know how to recognize him. He's got the whole Egyptian, headdress and the whole Egyptian dress, so he doesn't look like he used to. And so they don't recognize him. But he recognizes them. And he had a choice. Now, I know for me, I've had some things happen with my own family where you can forgive them in your mind, but when they come back in front of you, all of that trauma and drama kind of comes right back. Even though you've forgiven them, you're still kind of dealing with it. And I think that's kind of what it was for Joseph. He had forgiven his brothers, but now he had a choice. They were actually sitting there right in front of him. And he could reject them out of hand, send them home empty-handed. He could accuse them of being spies and have them thrown in jail and killed. He had choices. He could just give them food and get rid of them. he had a lot of different choices, and he had that, in that moment, he had to decide, do I forgive them? Do I tell them who I am? Or what do I do? And I have to think he probably prayed a little bit when he saw them. Okay, God, these are not the people I was expecting to walk right back into my life. What do you want me to do? And so, he had them arrested as spies. Had them thrown in prison. He kind of did, actually. And had them all thrown into prison, and eventually after a day or so, he let them out. And they're like, but no, we're these brothers. We're 10 brothers. There's an 11th at home. We used to be 12, but one died. And they're like, he's like, okay, knowing full well the truth. And they're like, no. He's like, how do I know you're 10 brothers? How do I know there's an 11th brother at home? You're spies. You came here to rob us. This is who you are. Like, no. He's like, all right, prove it to me. Go home, bring me the 11th brother. They're like, okay, we will. He's like, okay, but I'm going to keep this one over here as collateral. And he did. He kept one of the brothers as collateral. He kept Reuben. And he put Reuben back in prison, let the other ones go, and gave them the food that they came with, and sent them on their merry way. The brothers get about halfway home. They open up because they're hungry. They get some food out and discover that the money that they sent, that they paid, was back in their bags. So not only did Joseph give them food, but he also gave them back the money that they paid for. They go home, they eat all the food, spend a while longer. Reuben's still stuck in prison. And Jacob goes, hey, you need to go back and get some more food from Egypt. And they're like, we can't, Dad, not without Benjamin. And he's like, no, Benjamin's staying here. He's like, no, he meant it. If we don't take Benjamin, we're all up the creek. And he's like, nah. So a couple more days later, hunger is a very huge motivator. And Dad's like, okay, fine, take Benjamin. So they do. They take Benjamin, they go back to Joseph, they see Joseph again. Joseph does not have the rest of the spies this time. He actually invites them to dinner. And he invites them to dinner, and he sits them all down, and he gives them all food, and they have this huge banquet. And they're going, They let Reuben out to join the banquet. And the brothers are going, this is kind of weird. Last time we were here, he threw us in jail. This time he invites us over for dinner. And not only does he invite us over for dinner, but he has us sitting according to how we were born, like according to our ages. How in the world does he know that? That's kind of like intimate knowledge that no one would really know. And I'm like, okay, this is just weird. And then he, next day, sends them on their merry way again. Sends them off, puts all their food in a bucket, lets them leave. Except for, he could hear everything they said when they were talking to each other. And he was curious. I'm like, have they really changed? Are they still the same crazy brothers I had way back when? So he put a cup in Benjamin's bag.
A what?
A cup, a silver cup. So he had him sending food on their merry way, but he had one of his servants put a silver cup in Benjamin's bag and then send him off. And then they get about a couple miles out of town when all of a sudden these soldiers come running up behind them going, thieves, stop! And they're like, we didn't steal anything, we promise. Well, open up your bags. My master's silver cup is missing. And so they're like, okay, whoever's, if you find it, you can kill that person. Like, okay, well, we'll just take him to jail instead. So they open up all the bags, and of course, Benjamin is the one whose bag has the cup. And one of the brothers goes, we didn't do this, but I can't let you take this, brother. Take me instead. This is my dad's youngest son. It's the last son he has from his favorite wife. The other son had died. take me instead. And so when he left, that's what happened. And that's when Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, and they all had a family happy reunion. And as I'm listening to this story, I'm thinking about my brother kicked me out of my house. I know, right? I'm thinking about the different issues that I've had. And then my brother, when I came back from Russia, it did not go well. I was not a happy camper. And I was living with my brother and his wife at the time. And they basically told me I had 2 weeks to move out or they were going to send me to my sister's. And they were making decisions for me that I had no control over, that they had chosen what they were going to do for me without ever consulting me and talking to me about it. And with a lot of prayer, God came up with other plans. But it became a year where I moved 7 times in about 9 months. And I did a lot of couch surfing. And I have to think back at that time when Joseph was going through all of that. He had to believe in the process. He had to believe that God had a plan. And that there was a point to all of this. And there was. And God was with him in that prison. God was with him in that cell. God was with him when he was in a cage going off to Egypt. God was with him in the hard parts, as well as when he was doing well. And sometimes I feel like we have those moments where people make choices for us and we have to deal with the actions of them. But we have no choice in it, but we can choose how we respond to it. And that's what I get out of the story of Joseph. He had multiple opportunities to choose something else. He could have chose to sleep with Potiphar's wife. He chose not to. He could have chose to have his brothers killed, and he chose not to. He chose to trust God, and that plan that God had was the best for him, even when it didn't make sense. So, that's it.
He obeyed God that whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He did. Even when it wasn't easy, and even though it was hard.
So there's a popular saying, every cloud has a silver lining. Or after the storm comes the calm. And so a lot of times the Holy Spirit is working on us, refining us, and it's through these trials and tribulations that the Spirit works best. Because that's where we get to the point where we relinquish everything to Jesus and tell him, Jesus, just, not to parody the song, but just take the wheel and drive me out where you would have me. And so Joseph went through that. My wife has gone through that. I've gone through that. And I'm sure each and every person here has gone through that in some way. And we just have to remember that even though it looks bleak, God has a plan. And he's going to carry us through to the fulfillment of his will rather than our own. A lot more powerful when you realize that. And you just kind of smile and sit back and settle down for the ride because it's going to get bumpy. Lord, I thank you for my wife. I thank you for encouraging her to speak today and to share. I know that there's more in there. There's more that you would have said. And I know that in your timing, that will happen. God, I just ask for a blessing upon everyone here today, that they would experience your love and be healthy and safe, and that you would use them to talk to others and to share your love with everyone that they come in contact with, Lord. In Jesus' holy name, amen.
Amen.